ability to talk back, which is something we've never seen in the past. In the past, you saw great editors, white, sitting in aircon facility offices, dictating what South Africans must believe,
Right.
dictating what many of us should assume, what our state of being is like, dictating what we need to think of ourselves. And I think for the first time we've got a variety of media. We have a media group, black-owned in this country, that produces newspapers, and although it's still, the varieties are still not that large, we need more players in the game. We need to have more conversations. And I think those media groups that start are hardly hit because traffic doesn't go to them in terms of advertising. There's always a pushback, and they fight back from the gatekeepers of the industry, because he who pays the piper picks the tune.
Right.
And he who controls the narrative sets the agenda. And the narrative always desires to frame black individuals as incompetent, black individuals as corrupt, black businessmen and women as corrupt, black establishments as corrupt, because of gatekeeping. And that is part of the strengths of monopoly capitalism, because it doesn't only run the means of production, it also runs the communications and what to shut out and not what to dispense. For example, yesterday was a Sunday, and the Sunday Times issued an apology to Mazothi and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. The headline was big, but the apology is
not as amplified.
The apology
as the
is not that amplified, and many South Africans will not see that. But with the availability of media, some of us can ask the questions to say, but she's not the president, is she? She's only the custodian of the regulations at this point. Where is the fact that the Mazothi brothers are corrupt? And if they are, why hasn't Bheki Cele charged them? So we have to look back and ask to say, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, at the breaking of the news of the coronavirus, actually said that this is a sickness, this is a disease that affects your lungs. Doesn't the opening of cigarettes speak to that effect? So we need to ask the questions where in the past, it was just one old guy sitting and dishing out the messages that he thought was competent. But now there's a variety of voices, and it speaks to democracy, it speaks to further engagement, it speaks to amplified voices and debate in a robust democratic constitution.
You and I are journalists, Sifiso, and there's been a lot of talk in the country and I suppose in Africa about how journalists have somehow lost their integrity and they are embedded, so to speak. How do we regain our integrity and make sure that we can be trusted again? I mean, we have social media spaces, Sipho, that we're speaking about, that we're saying people kind of have their own agency, they can kind of discern what is wrong and what is right. Granted, it can not only be used for celebrity or gossip stories, but for more important issues that have to do with driving the economy and empowering the majority of the people. But how do we make that shift?
Well, I think the shift must come from not just newsrooms. It must come from a compliance to the rule of law. When this news published about what happened at the National Command Council, which didn't happen, and then there's a retraction or there's an apology, which was printed yesterday, what accountability mechanisms are there? If we publish a story of a woman who allegedly had an affair and she stole a lot of money and her image was tarnished and her marriage was blown into smithereens, if I then write an apology the next day or issue a withdrawal, what about her family and children? Some of that damage is irreversible. So there needs to be an accountability compliance to say, if these things happen, what must happen? What happens when journalists lie? Nothing in this nation. It was only when you and I, if you remember, were sitting at the funeral of Winnie Madikizela Mandela,
Correct.
And we got the statement that the man who issued her the investigation and the proof to her killing Stompie actually lied, that it was an agency called Stratcom that labeled her a murderer with without the facts. And it was only in the week and in the day of her funeral that they retracted that to say, well, all along, they had actually had proof that that didn't happen. But what happens to those individuals who then retract that story? What happens to the man who was instigated and paid by a malicious propaganda machinery called Stratcom to further the narrative that Winnie killed Stompie? What happens to that man? Nothing has happened so far. So there needs to be accountability and compliance, and I think in law to say, whilst we need to expose corruption, whilst we need to come to the core of capture, while we need to get the message to our people out there, we should never cross the line and make up things that don't exist, or in malicious behavior go against individuals to harm them or their family for monetary gain.
But should that just be around professionals? I mean, the conversations that we have on social media amongst ourselves, you know, on WhatsApp, that can be damaging. Who holds us to account, Sipe? I suppose there's a legal recourse that one can take with regards to that, but do we see that happening? Are people aware of the rights that they have?
I'm of a firm belief that there is no platform for accountability of journalists, or an effective one for that matter. Okay. I understand that there is an ombudsman, but I think it's toothless. The African National Congress, as the ruling party for some years, have been battling with amending powers or giving powers to that effect, which has not happened as yet. But I think the accountability comes with control. For an example, most of the journalists who report all those hogwash news or all those disturbing and propaganda news that they feed to general public of South Africa, it's because it's sponsored by their employer. So they are not always at fault, but those are sponsored views or commentary from their employer. So if you don't have progressive other platforms or other employers who will feed the public what it's supposed to be feeding, then we'll have a problem.
But that's the thing. Who's to say this is what the public is supposed to be fed? Who's the judge and who's the juror?
Well, we've got organizations like SANEF, and
who've been found wanting in certain circumstances.
Who have been found wanting
yes.
in many events in this country. We've got the Ombudsman, which does it really help, and how far does it go? And perhaps the story meets the Ombudsman and all you get is an apology. But you'll never reverse the stories on the internet. Those videos possibly don't disappear. The harm suffered by your reputation and your family and your business might last you forever. There needs to be a mechanism of accountability. But where I do agree with Spesihle is that those views are often sponsored. When you see the attack by some publications and some media against individuals in this country, black businessmen and women in this country, one shouldn't just make the assertion that there is necessarily guilt. Some, in many cases, have not been proven. I think one always needs to ask themselves if there's a new book and there are these gross allegations, you know, the paper tiger or the books on Mahashule or someone. One must always ask what benefit is there to this book, because there's often a benefit. You remember, and I quote Winnie because of the agency we defined the Stratcom, had the most sensational headlines day after day. And we learned in the week of her passing that was a sponsored, measured formula. It was a disinformation campaign that had set itself, well-funded and resourced to destroy her. Are we alive to the same events? Are we alive to the same time? Is this what is happening? Amapungane said itself a few weeks ago to say they're going to look at people's WhatsApp groups or people's Twitter handles, and what people communicate on Twitter, a type of investigation to close down what some people believe is liberalism, to type or share what you want on Twitter. Now, why do they want to do that? The reality is that it is because editors, white editors, big branches of the media in this country no longer have that control. They are no longer as believable as they were in the 80s and the 90s. Now, people are a nation that talks back. People on social media, Black Twitter, gives them the rebuttal, and they want to take the power away. So media ultimately is a contested territory, and some want to hold on to that power and that monopoly.
So I guess that's the power that comes with media that we spoke about initially. I'm just remembering now the story of the current public protector, the issue of the costs. There was the judgment that happened a few days ago. We didn't quite hear a lot about that being reported in the media as much as her other cases are amplified. Would that be an example of what you'd be talking about here?
Most definitely. I think Sfiso is right. What they do is that they want to control the narrative. All progressive news, well, as far as us, the black radicals who operate in this space, all progressive news are suffocated. There's no report of any progressive moves by any. For an example, there are ministers who've been doing wonderful work, like Mama Sisulu, but there's no report of that. News that are reported, there's investigations about advisors and all those things. So they want to control the narrative. And also, what we must always remember is what was said by Steve Biko, that the most important weapon in the mind of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So by running a particular narrative that would be believed, or what they do is that they repeat the same narrative over and over again up until you believe it. And also the other important factor that has been troubling us as South Africans and Africa is the mere fact that we lack consciousness. We don't know what is right. We don't know who we are at most. Where are we? Where are we going to? So it's very, very difficult to then find a balance as to, is this for us? Is this against us? Is this who we are, and all those things. I think that the problem is very vast, and it manifests from the mere fact that we don't have control of anything.
I want to give people that consume the news some benefit of the doubt, that they should be intelligent enough to be able to discern what POTUS has termed as fake news. Pret was probably there before he termed it that. And of course, being able to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to news. But if it's constantly brought to their attention and it's the only news that's available to them, what then do they do? How then do they circumvent that problem?
If you're continually vilified, it almost becomes believable. And if someone else comes with a different view to say, oh, maybe Audrey didn't do it, then we deem that as fake news because you're one speaking out of 9. And so in this day and age, the one speaking the truth might be deemed, the one who's actually telling fake news whilst speaking against the truth. These things are all narrative building, and it is designed to have a psychological impact over time. Our country, however, is different from the US. We've got great margins in education. I come from a school that struggled to have toilets in a primary school in Akaville, in Emalahleni. I don't think they have them right now. When I got to university, there are students who took out a keyboard and they typed. For some, myself and counterparts, you struggle to find the space bar on the keyboard because of our gross inequality in this nation.
And I'm glad you've brought that up, because it just brings me to the topic of the world pandemic that we're dealing with right now, especially here in South Africa as well, and how it has exposed some of those weaknesses that we have within our institutions. We speak of children having to resort to online learning. Not every child in South Africa has access to a laptop or a computer or Wi-Fi and data. How do you think the media has handled reporting this particular pandemic?
We haven't exposed it. I mean, we haven't exposed the depth, I think, of the inequality in this nation. and it's gross. When a child from a village school in the township, by the way, who has to walk 2 kilometers to get to school or longer. In KZN, some children to date have to cross rivers in Hlutu before getting to school. Whereas some schools in this country have VSETs and aircons and do online learning. Those two children are in the same system of education. But what they learn, how they consume it, their utterances from there on are going to be worlds apart.
Right.
So this inequality we're talking about starts very tender and works its way up into universities, into corporate structures. Our learning is not the same. Our backgrounds are not the same. And some of those stories are yet untold. But there's an example I just want to take you to now that this COVID-19 has hit the world. You're sitting with a child who goes to school, their parents get social grant. It is a quintile 1 school, which is a non-fee paying school, and they receive a lunch at school. After school, they have to walk 2 kilometers or more before getting home and have 1 meal a day. Averett University study finds. Against a child who has a good breakfast in the morning, helpers at home, gets dropped off in school, comes back, is not tired, the helper has cooked lunch, they consume lunch and work more on their homework and prepare and practice maths a little more, and the parents come home and they have a good meal. Psychologically, physically, those children are not going to turn out the same.
Right.
So our methods, our gross inequality in South Africa is at the base of our problems.
Yes, and those are the stories that I'm asking to say, Sipho, have we been able to really get to the bottom of it and expose it? Or, I mean, we've been getting numbers every day from the Ministry of Health. You know, we know exactly how many people have been infected, how many people have unfortunately passed away. But when it comes to how this virus has really touched people in different ways, do you think as the media we've been able to do that?
I agree with Sfiso. There hasn't been a lot of exposure, and there's a reason for this. It's because those who are in charge currently are loved by those who control the media. In a case whereby it was the formers who are in charge of the state, I'm telling you there will be articles every day to say, how is a child who crosses a river expected to have Wi-Fi and data at home for school learning, for an example. So it's the narrative because they want to protect. They have not been at the forefront of exposing because that narrative will expose those who are in charge. But it's not a coincidence. I can tell you this. It's not a coincidence that there hasn't been that much of an exposure. But I think also Twitter then and all the other social media platforms provide us a platform to expose such, because on your mainstream media there hasn't been any exposure at all, and purely based on the mere fact that they love those who are in charge, so they don't want to expose them.
I mean, we have different provinces like the Western Cape that is crying out to say, you know, there's an infringement on our civil rights. We don't want to be treated like children. We want to be able to go out and do what we want. Today, I think there was a story about the South African Human Rights Commission wanting to take the Western Cape government to court for, you know, reopening schools before I think the Basic Education Minister had said it's okay to go ahead and it's safe to be able to do that. They went ahead and did that. You know, such things like that. You know, it's like a push and pull that we see. What do you attribute that to?
Well, we attribute it to the inequality that is vast in this nation, but the control because of who controls the economy and the streams of income thereof. But the bigger discussion is a desire to keep things as they are. There is a vast middle class, there's a great lower class, and some people who think they're in middle class during this COVID-19 situation are having a realization that they're actually not middle class.
Paycheck away from poverty.
One paycheck away from poverty. And then we've got the elites who sit at the top and dictate what should and should not happen in this nation. They take government to court to enforce certain regulations. they challenge the courts through certain organizations and so on and so forth. It shows a country, a democracy, that is grossly unequal. It shows a democracy where the masses who are in need, the masses who have much desire, are at the bottom and they don't have power. And we see a top, a film, a froth at the top, who've lived well, who've handed the country over politically, but not economically, who want to keep their picket fences and say, as long as we maintain this ideal of a good life, don't mess with it. We've seen police and military, the military in places like Tembisa, in places like Alex, giving young people push-ups. There've been reportage of assaults. A man has died at the hands of the SANDF. How many white people have been affected by that? How many white people have stoned the streets of Linwood or Sandton or Rivonia or Lyndhurst and sent people back into their houses? This indoctrinal inequality has been portrayed through our security forces, and people in Cape Town want an advent of that because they've never been kept in their houses. They've never been told what to do. There's never been a ban on where they can go. But black people have always had this exposure. They've always lived like that. So whilst the debate in Sandton is, don't send us back to our homes, the debate in Alex is, don't keep us in our homes. Because how do 9 people who live in a 2-room or a 1-room shack in Alexandra self-isolate? How do they social distance? How do you keep them all in one shack at 2 p.m. in the afternoon in South Africa because there's a global pandemic? This man runs a haircut shop. This woman sells beans and tomatoes on the side of the road. When you tell them to pack up for 2 months because there's a lockdown, those black people tell you and say, well, we're going to die anyway. It will either be because of the coronavirus or poverty. But in anything we do, there's death. There's another segment of our population, another pocket that's sitting at home under Wi-Fi and
in the comfort of their homes.
And the comfort
really.
of their homes, and they say, don't keep us at home. And you have people in
want to be able to go out to have
and you have
lunch.
people in Alex saying, we want to leave.
Right.
We want to come out.
So just to give the president some kind of credit if he deserves it. I mean, he came out, I think, today or yesterday, apologizing that some mistakes have been made. I think it's the second time that he's alluded to that with regards to how COVID-19 regulations have been handled and how they've affected people from different walks of life in South Africa, because like you said, it's difficult to just give one blanket to everyone of regulations because it affects them differently because of their stations in life. Would you say that his handling of this has been commendable, Sepe? He's been known to be a president who likes to consult a lot. Is this the kind of leadership that has been effective in this pandemic?
Firstly, I think I must answer the last question.
Sure.
It is also questionable as to who does he consult with. Because the African National Congress in Luthuli House, there's always contradicting statements. And also taking from the statements that you get from leaders who are in Luthuli House, you will tell that whatever is being implemented is contrary to what they believe in. So it's also very questionable as to who does he consult, because it's definitely not the poor, not his own political party. So it raises a question. But also on the issue of the handling of the regulations, my biggest problem is the mere fact that the current government is of a belief that they are only governing the elites. I think that's the biggest problem I have with them. Because, for an example, most of what is being regulated here in South Africa, or even what was gazetted as the new regulations during the COVID-19 pandemic, was copy and paste from what was done by the first world countries. A first world country that has no dutwa, a first world country that has no archival school, that does not have toilets. So that's my problem with the implementation of or even also the gazetted regulations, is that they seem to be governing, or they seem to only be addressing the rich and not considering the poor of the poorest. As Fiso has said, how are people in Alexandra expected to stay indoors for 21 days in a 2-room wells? There's 9 of them. There's no spaces. They can't breathe themselves. How do you expect those people to even self-isolate whenever there are questions with regards, or whenever they see symptoms of the virus in themselves? So everything that has been addressed or said seem to have been addressed to the elites. That's my biggest problem. And secondly, also on the issue of the Western Cape, which is the Europe of South Africa. It is the Europe of South Africa. It's a very strange province. You know, the people who are in charge of the economy are mostly based in the Western Cape, firstly. Secondly, their own policies are equivalent to first world class of quarantine areas. So they can quarantine whenever they want. They can stay at home whenever they want. But because they are fed up with staying at home, they want to see themselves outside now. But they forget that those who are running a risk of being infected are their employers. So it is also very problematic, but it also, the arrogance, they get it from the mere fact that they run ownership. They are in charge of the means of production.
So I don't know if you gentlemen have been monitoring how the Rand has been performing throughout when the pandemic started and infections started coming into affecting South Africa and where we are today. There was a time that it really plunged. It seems to be picking up now. How do we get the country back? Not that you're specialists or anything like that, but with the way people have lost their jobs, with the way industry has been affected, how do we get to a place that is safe enough for people to come back into the economy and be a part of it? I know part of your argument has been to say that the problem is the majority doesn't have a share of that economy. It's owned by a few elite. So how does that dynamic then get sorted out?
Well, there's definitely going to be a hemorrhaging of jobs, and I think we've already seen the signs of that. Things are not going to get better. But perhaps in our presidency's defense, it's going to be like that everywhere in the world. The coronavirus pandemic has brought the world economies to its knees, so to speak. But South Africa is not going to be immune to that. We're already suffering gross unemployment in this country, triggering now at over 40%. If the stats and the estimations are anything to go by, it's going to be harder on our citizens to survive, which will then put more pressure on the state because, as you know, we've got a very big social system, social funding. SASSA pays 17 million beneficiaries a month, 17 million. And those people are a cost to the state. Now, the SASSA beneficiaries increase and there's no jobs, which means the government is not collecting much tax. That's an economic disaster. The GDP is not going to grow unless there's rapid employment. I think what government needs to do at this point is formulate strategy to keep people at work. Right. Germany, some years ago, implemented systematic government policy. You need a serious reason to fire somebody in Germany. You need astronomical research and proof to want to let people go. They strive to keep businesses running.
But isn't South Africa the same with the unions that we have?
To keep people employable. The unions are another story. I attended the the conference as soon as President Ramaphosa took over, the Youth Employment Conference. And people were pledging monies to create work. The material hasn't been seen. Those jobs are not noticed. South Africa continues to hemorrhage jobs. Yes, we've got unions that are very vocal. But the core of the matter is people are losing jobs. They were losing jobs pre-coronavirus. It will be worse now. There needs to be I think, a forensic analysis, a forensic study on how to keep people employed. And it must become law, in fact. Some political parties have raised some concerns, I don't know how feasible, to say people who are renting shouldn't be vacated, shouldn't be kicked out of their residential apartments, and things
some
like
kind
that.
of deferral
Some
of
kind
rental
of deferrals.
payment.
If you know, for those who are paying car and mortgages, a 5-year plan should be given some temporary relief. Time will tell if the banks are going to play along. But I think government must, in a type of dictatorial style, speak to business to say, we've got to keep people employed. The one thing you cannot do, it's almost treasonous, would be just to release people. And assist. I mean, restaurants are going to be dying. And assist restaurants that need the resource to keep people employed. It must be pivotal, because if those individuals are not kept employed, they become a need to the state.
Right.
And our state at this point cannot afford it.
True. So another motive topic that has been doing the rounds is the issue of getting our children back into school. I don't know if you gentlemen have decided if you're taking your kids back to school or not, but a lot of parents have been very skeptical and obviously haven't felt safe to want to do that, while others are quite frankly happy to have their kids go back to school just to get a break. But what are your thoughts around that?
We're having a conversation with Sviso before the show started that before you can sanitize children, you must provide sanitation, which has been a biggest challenge of the government party, which is all obviously historic, but they've had serious challenges with getting rid of pit toilets in rural areas of Limpopo, the Eastern Cape, and some parts of Mpumalanga and the Free State. So they've had years and years and years to try and deliver that, which
Right.
they've failed. So how are they expected now, out of the blue, to deliver sanitization to all the schools? So I just think it's a gamble, but also the other contradicting factor is the mere fact that years ago, people must graduate, people must go to high schools, pupils must get to grade 1, so there must be spaces that is created for those who are coming into the schooling system. Yes. So I think that's the biggest contradiction. But
so what, do we sacrifice our children for the next generation? What happens?
I think it's a very big problem. But
It's going to be a gamble.
Yeah, it's a gamble.
But we tinker on the lines of unconstitutionalism, because healthcare is pivotal, and human life must be spared at all costs. I don't have research backing on this, but I don't think this year is going to turn out normally. It's shown, 2020 has shown signs of serious abnormality, but children are not just going to go back to school, write the September prelims, sit home for a week and then go back. It's not going to be that easy. They are defining unconstitutional fragments in the children returning to school right now. How do you sanitize them if you don't have sanitization? You don't have sanitation in schools, struggling with water and basic toilets. The social system, feeding schemes, how are you going to navigate that? Some classrooms in my province of Mpumalanga sit with 45 grade 1s in a classroom,
So who's going
45
to-
grade 6s in a classroom. When you spread them out, you're spreading a school roll of 700 kids. They're going to be spread out across the whole school. It's going to be a medical disaster. One of the important things I think Health and Minister Motshekga has overlooked is that children already come infected or go home with infection, because you separate them at school and you create social distance at school, but they play together. They come from households where people perhaps are already infected. How do you deal with that. So it's one thing to say we're going to have sanitizers at the gate, we're going to have sanitizers in the classrooms, but our health department continues to say some of the coronavirus cases, many of them are asymptomatic. So which means you'll be sitting in a classroom with many learners who are infected, infecting others, but they don't show the signs. The temperature doesn't go up because you've told us that this virus can be, in many cases, asymptomatic. And so it's going to be a gamble for children. I'm still not drawn on what I'm going to do with my children, but I think we're bordering on the lines of unconstitutionalism.
Yeah, because our public health systems already have taken a huge toll outside of COVID. Now with this, with children being allowed to go back to school, should anything happen, God forbid, we have a situation where we have a spike in children being infected, and we lose some of those children, who would be held liable for that? Are we looking at class lawsuits? What do you call them?
There would have to be, I think, specifically, there'd have to be a class lawsuit if it happened. Who do you sue? This is the protocol: Minister of Education, Deputy Minister. We started from the command team, which is the president and the command team who've set the regulation. You get the minister, the deputy minister. You get overall protocol in the education department, who is the MEC of education, and so on. In the school system, you would get the governing body, you'd get the principal, the school management team, and the teacher concerned. The debate would also be, how liable are their parents? Because you dressed this child, you allowed this child to come to school. It was your constitutional right to keep your child at home.
You knew the risk.
You knew the risk when you took your child to school. So, it's going to be a gamble. It will have us in courts for the longest time. But the unconstitutionality of this thing is that you'll have another learner whose parents are well off, and they have Wi-Fi and they have tutorials and they are reading and learning at home. And you have other learners sitting at home because they are in a trajectory form, they are the descendants of apartheid. They're sitting there with no data and no Wi-Fi and no laptops. They cannot be learning at home. How do you deal with that situation?
Right.
You get pockets of our society. Some children cannot be homeschooled. Some children cannot be learned, cannot be taught online, whilst some can. Come December, are you going to pass the children that read and studied online and fail the rest? That's unconstitutional. The coronavirus is no doing of their own. How can you do that? And so when the results have to come out at the end of 2020, how do you qualify the grade 11 results? Because you've got a pocket of society of children who studied and they're doing well online, whilst the rest couldn't go to school because it was no fault of their own.
Exactly.
I think in all forms, the minister will face several lawsuits.
And speaking of court cases, since we're here discussing stories that are being reported in the media space, a former President Jacob Zuma's court case has been one to look at. How do you feel or think that has been playing out in the media, especially with the latest developments?
It has been very disturbing, also from the leaked letter or conversation between the NPA and the judge president in KZN, Advocate Jabi, Justice Jabi. It was not widely reported, also surprisingly, but it was big news. Luckily enough, on social media, we had to discuss it, which is the advantage of the variety of social media. But what's surprising also is the mere fact that the NPA, which is the state in this case, has been on record more than 2 times that they are ready for the case. They are ready to go on trial. But all of a sudden, when the defense team says, no, let's go on trial in October, they are then ducking and diving, which is very surprising. But concerning is the mere fact that the mainstream media has not been reporting on the leak of or the development of the case. They've only been giving us a particular narrative, not a fully fledged story, which is the problem that we're dealing with here in South Africa. Yes.
So we've been dealing with this, well, not that we've been dealing, but in the media space as journalists, Sifiso, way back when this case started, and how it has played out and where we are today. And between then and now, there's been new media that has come into the space. Have you noticed any interesting aspects on how it's been reported on? Not just on television broadcasting, but also in print?
From where I've written a lot.
Because I know you also into print, so how would you compare that?
For me,
two?
the interesting part, and I've ventilated this point aggressively in print, was for 15 years we've heard about the state's readiness to go to trial. And on the eve, finally, when Zuma retracts his application for a stay of prosecution and says, I'm here, let's have a go at it. KPMG is at the top of the story. Now the court, which had KPMG as a witness, is now investigating KPMG, the same company that compiled the list of those 784 charges. Oddly, the court is now not really saying it wants a postponement. And I thought that was quite bizarre because I've always expected that they were ready. They've had 15 years of the case. This case still resembles a period where Jacob Zuma was the MEC of Economic Development in KZN, and allegedly received a bribe of 500,000 from a company called Tint, now referred to as Thales. The state has spent 100 million on this case so far. The state has spent 100 million trying to get 500,000. So this slideshow communication that's happening with these lawyers is very peculiar. It was interesting for me when Zuma fired his lawyer, the lawyer he had, Dan Manja, for Eric Mabuza attorneys. And as soon as that happened, the gloves came off and they said, we're ready to file. I think something is going on in this case. They haven't even thrown it to September or October. The state would want a sitting sometime next year. According to the documents, there's no date, sometime next year. So I don't know. Perhaps the evidence is not turning out how they had intended. But I would have been very interested to see. Jacob Zuma's always said he wants his day in court, and I think this is it. And he should have it. I want to see how this is going to come out. I think for me as a journalist, I'm also anticipating who else signed those arms deal documents. You know, who else is implicated, because the names are going to be dropped. And this is going to be termed and coined the trial of the century. I was really looking forward to camping outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court, but that's not going to happen. But there are a lot of loopholes in the case, and I think that part has come to exposition.
And speaking of how people have wanted to take power back into their own hands, and how the media handles story, we saw how President Jacob Zuma and his son has been making these videos on YouTube and telling what their side of the story, and perhaps an indication of feeling frustrated at how maybe the mainstream media has not been portraying what they deem to be their side of the story, factual issues. How do you think that has panned out?
I think what has been a good trend with what happened with the Voltage TV launch was the mere fact that people want Zuma to talk, but they are not ready for President Zuma to talk. Because every time they say, no, President Zuma must tell us what he knows. But every time he dishes this fact, they are the first ones also to be in defense of against the fact that President Zuma dishes out. And it has always been a problem because they confuse guilt with President Zuma's discipline. President Zuma is on record saying that I don't want to talk because it will divide the organization that I love, not because I'll be compromised. No, he says, I do not want to talk because I will compromise my organization, which has so much love, and it is nothing, there's nothing I know more than this organization. So, but a mere fact that President Zuma has been reluctant to talk, people then confuse that with guilt. So now he has started talking, and he trends every day more than the Minister of Health. Whenever there's a zooming with the Zuma video, they trend far more than the Minister of Health pandemic results, which is very interesting.
But just to play devil's advocate here, some are saying that perhaps he's playing to public sympathy ahead of his court case. Would you think that is the case?
Politics.
And do you think is it helping or is it doing damage for him?
But I would have liked him to relay the facts and put the facts out there in the public domain. And I think I've had it with, the stance that he would like to talk, but he doesn't want to destroy the beloved movement. If there was corruption, Jacob Zuma should talk, and he should put it out there. If he was the center of corruption, he should put it out there. If others are there, I don't know why he would want to withhold the facts. And I think, quite frankly, this tit and this seduction of the day Zuma will talk is a conversation we've been having for a long time as journalists, and I think we're ready for that. We want to hear him expose if there is something he needs to say. Lest people start thinking that he's crying wolf and that there is nothing to say. That's why he keeps us hanging on. And that's why I wanted this, this court case to finally start, to play out, so it gives us one South Africa's defining moment of what happened in the Armsdale case. The zooming in with the Zumas, it's him and his son having a conversation. I think they want to tell the story. They should be allowed to. The big story for me is who's involved in the Armsdale case. And I think he owes it to the nation to take South Africa into his confidence. We want the dirty linen aired there. And maybe this is the opportunity for the ANC to purge itself. It's not happening at the Zondo Commission. It should happen at the Peter Maritzburg Airport.
And I really wish we had more time to actually speak about the State Capture Commission, the inquiry that's happening, and how it has played out from when it started up until now, how the media has been responding to it, the witnesses that we've seen coming through, and how they have been giving their information there, and how it has been received. Unfortunately, I'm being told we've run out of time. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see your faces back here soon so we can have more interesting discussions.
Okay, you will. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
And to your viewers at home, thank you so much for tuning in. And this conversation does not have to end here. Please go onto our social media platforms. We are on Twitter at GUN_TV_, and our Facebook page, which is a Galaxy Universal Network. We'd love to hear your comments. Go ahead and engage us, and we'll be happy to speak with you then. For now, though, we take a very short commercial break. Do stay with us. We'll be back after this.
Challenge your ordinary. Experience the extraordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Now, I believe that my peace is my most valuable asset.
Absolutely beautiful! This is exactly what I was looking for! DJ Khaled!
It is a day to celebrate.
We're ready for action.
I like it when it's nice and soft. Yeah, that is nice.
How was it like growing up in Nigeria? Yes, sir, you know what it is.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
You should just be what you want to be.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with Starsat.
For unbiased, uncensored news updates, rely on Galaxy News. We are fearless, zero favor and zero fiction.
We are the bridge that connects you from the rural to the urban.
From Times Square to Mary Fitzgerald Square, we're sure to give you the hottest stories from all four corners of the globe.
Bringing the latest news on business trends at the speed of light and transporting you to a world unseen.
Now so we come fly, go enter Lagos. The Zanga, inside Zanga for Lagos.
From the boardroom to the fan park and to the field.
Op ons kanaal nuus wat jou sal skok en verras.
Sources at the ranks, banks and all places buzzing with action. Sports, business, politics, your entertainment, fashion trends. We're talking of breaking news, exclusive and certainly the hottest stories in town.
For Galaxy News, I am Vuyo Mgwelo.
Now maybe this your boy, Osilama Otono.
Itabakheng Khatlo from Galaxy News.
I am Katlo Mkhambanyane from Galaxy News.
I am Tusanda Nomosaka Kwabe Kuto for Galaxy UN.
As bayiskele mthina.
Challenge your ordinary. Experience the extraordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Now, I believe that my peace is my most valuable asset.
Absolutely beautiful! This is exactly what I was looking for! DJ Khaled!
It is a day to celebrate.
We're ready for action.
I like it when it's nice and soft. That is nice.
How was it like growing up in Nigeria? Yes, sir, you know what it is.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
You should just be what you want to be.
Experience the extraordinary with Starsat.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with Starsat.
For unbiased, uncensored news updates, rely on Galaxy News. We are fearless, zero favor and zero fiction.
We are the bridge that connects you from the rural to the urban.
From Times Square to Mary Fitzgerald Square, we're sure to give you the hottest stories from all four corners of the globe.
Bringing the latest news on business trends at the speed of light and transporting you to a world unseen.
Now so we come fly, go enter Lagos. The Zanga, inside Zanga for Lagos.
From the boardroom to the fan park and to the field.
Op ons kanaal nuus wat jou sal skok en verras.
Sources at the ranks, banks and all places buzzing with action. Sports, business, politics, your entertainment, fashion trends. We're talking of breaking news, exclusive and certainly the hottest stories in town.
For Galaxy News, I am Vuyo Mgwelo.
Now maybe this your boy, Osilama Otono.
Itabakheng Khatlo from Galaxy News.
I am Katlo Mkhambanyane from Galaxy News.
I am Tusanda Nomosaka Kwabe Kuto for Galaxy UN.
As bayiskele mthina.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to extend the nationwide lockdown by a further 2 weeks beyond the initial 21 days. This means that most of the existing lockdown measures will remain in force.
It's a combination of law enforcement agency. Our call is very clear. People must stay home, they must not be traveling unnecessarily.
This might last longer.
As you have heard it, we are still right here reporting for Galaxy TV News. Galaxy News.
Stay tuned with us.
Level 3 regulations are an indication that our country has done the preparatory work to start moving towards opening up more sectors of the economy. This is because the last 2 months of lockdown gave us a room to build up an extensive public health response and prepare our health system for a possible increased infection rate. Level 3 regulations are an indication
Challenge your ordinary. Experience the extraordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Now, I believe that my peace is my most valuable asset.
Absolutely beautiful! This is exactly what I was looking for! DJ Khaled!
It is a day to celebrate.
We're ready for action. I like it when it's nice and soft. That is nice.
How was it like growing up in Nigeria? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know what it is.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
You should just be what you want to be.
Experience the extraordinary with Starsat.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with Starsat.
For unbiased, uncensored news updates, rely on Galaxy News. We are fearless, zero favor and zero fiction.
We are the bridge that connects you from the rural to the urban.
From Times Square to Mary Fitzgerald Square, we're sure to give you the hottest stories from all four corners of the globe.
Bringing the latest news on business trends at the speed of light and transporting you to a world unseen.
Now so we come fly, go enter Lagos. The
This is Galaxy Universal Network. Thank you so much for staying with us. A warm welcome to all our guests in South Africa and across the continent. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Audrey Chimwanda. In studio with me now, I have the chairman of the network to help us understand how this media house came about and to learn more about all the intricate details that went to bringing about this channel. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. And I'm actually happy to be here.
Yes. So our chairman's name, his full name, for some of you who may not know him, is Mr. Mokgokare Richard Seleke. So thank you. We're all excited. The whole family of Galaxy Universal Network, we're celebrating today as we have become one of the champions in the media space in South Africa. Perhaps you could start by telling us how the journey has been for you from starting to birth this network and where we are today.
I must say that looking back, this dream started more than 2 years ago. And what is most amazing is that the 4 individuals were seated around the table, sipping coffee and having a conversation that begins to outline that there is a need for an independent media platform that could transcend beyond South Africa and usher in an era where Africa can be in conversation with each other. Ideally because for economic development to happen, for poverty to be eradicated, and all the frustrations that you know about facing an African child is through conversation, a God-given ability of humanity to be able to transcend beyond the situation that they face. And media supposed to play that particular role. And that conversation of these 4 individuals gave birth to a concept, to an idea, and practically me being me and my background, having served government, having traveled the world, the understanding of how to put things together. And we ended up knocking in the StarSat door.
Right.
Yes, and looking back at Star Satellite as an investment in South Africa by the Chinese, that's where you begin to see the value of foreign investment. Where a platform such as StarSat, which is a media platform and a satellite technology system that interconnects African countries, and we saw what it meant and it represented. And fortunate to us, we realized that they did not have a media platform that is based in South Africa, that is locally based, a news provider that could provide local content, and we took the opportunity. And here we are today.
Right. And as most people say, you know, with brilliant ideas such as the one that has birthed this media house, a lot of minds come together to be able to do that. Could you tell us about, you know, part of your team that you say you spoke to, as you said, you were having a cup of coffee and you had this discussion, and today we have Galaxy Universal Network?
Yeah, I would start talking about Sisanda Nwabe Kutat. A young lady who's not even crossed her 30s. At the time, she was running Black Excellence, which was an internet-based media platform. And looking at what she had done at the time, it was more about saying, let's take this to another level. Let's build from what you have. And being a journalist herself and having traveled the journey, the youthfulness in herself and the articulacy of understanding the dream. In me starting with her, it's actually to acknowledge the role of women in any project that you do. The ability to be focused, to be precise, and to be committed to the dream itself. That's how I would define her role as part and parcel of the team. And Mr. Mokoena is a very calm, cool-headed individual who doesn't have many words. He's listening most of the time, but he makes sure that we do not lose sight of the objective. A man of a big heart and a belief. And Andrew, Moema, Andrew is a very laughable character who's very jolly, who more often than not, you even think he is not listening to a conversation.
Right.
But I must say we've grown to become a family. And we've grown to understand that the days and the era of individuals or sole proprietorship has passed. For Africans to understand the ability for them to build institutions of sole identity of Africa is through working together. It's through individuals coming together, sharing a common dream, and more importantly, the discipline of going through the pain of the journey.
Right. Of course, that's part of the journey, isn't it? Especially in South Africa, and perhaps not just in South Africa. Maybe it's a story that a lot of countries can resonate with. That the media space is a space that is hotly contested, and as a Galaxy Universal Network, making sure that you take up your space and you cement yourself in that space as well. Could you take us through how the teething problems were and how you managed to overcome that?
I think I've learned a lot in that journey. And the totality of us also have learned a lot. And I'll start with one important aspect that most people believe it is a kingmaker, which is the financial resources. They are always limited. But we've come to realize that they are not bigger than the dream itself. The pain of having to make a choice between spending a resource in your family and putting it in the company. A company with a dream that is far-fetched. Ideally, that in itself have taught us a discipline that no one will believe in your concept and in your dream unless you make it to crawl. Only when it crawls, someone will believe that it will stand up and walk. And the pain of taking that is dear to you, that is probably something that you could be spending to repair a tire of your car.
Right.
But then you know that rent has to be paid for the building. An extra camera has to be bought. It is that painful journey. But more importantly, and I will forever actually acknowledge a team of young people we started with. A team of young people who through sweat of minimal resources, half the month you realize that their stipend has finished. And they still wake up to come to work. They still wake up to make sure that information is uploaded, which means what drives them is no longer the financial appetite, but the dream itself.
And the passion.
And the passion for what they do. It is Youth Month, and it's important for me to highlight this because what I actually realized is that the future of this particular company, I think they have seen it far much more than us, because possibility is far greater because they might even leave it beyond us. And that, for me, is an important aspect, a pinnacle that I hope many people who've got young people in their own companies would see the importance of investing as much as possible, because they are actually the future of whatever seed that you are planting.
Right. And would you say that is what informed the kind of staff that we have here at Galaxy Universal Network, the issue of empowering the youth? There's a lot of young people that are running around and making all this magic that our viewers see here today happening and doing it very well, and making sure that they are empowered economically. Was that one of the decisions that pushed you to do that?
I think the most pronounced decision is our collective choice actually to even choose Sisanda, young as she is, to be the CEO of the company. So if we have vested such an important responsibility to a young person, it automatically then says that we understood that the future of media is based on technology. And the manipulation of technology and the creativity that is necessary for us to put products on the table that could be attractive to across the board requires a youthful team that could work long hours, that could transcend the boundaries of creativity. And that is actually our cutting point, and that is actually what gives us an edge. I feel that edge even amongst those that have been in this game for longer.
Right. And as you're conceptualizing the idea of this network, sir, how did you want to set it apart from the old players that have been in the game for a long time, for people to want to wake up in the morning and choose to watch Galaxy Universal Network? What is that one thing that you think would set this channel apart?
I would actually extend it beyond more than one thing. But the catalyst is we have a veteran like Ntate Molefe, with his experience from the SABC, blending it with the young people. It just gives you that, crystal point that where you blend experience, ambition, and the thirst of achieving together. At a vision level, we looking at South Africa, disaggregated as it is, because it has got urban, it has got townships, it has got settlements, it also has villages.
Sure.
We want to be able to service all. We do not want to provide news that are only urban-based. We want the voices of the marginalized to come to the fore. Our second phase is to transcend beyond that into the continent. South Africa is a hub of many African migrants who are here, and with them, it's a pool of experience, knowledge and understanding of the countries where they come from. And Galaxy would want to reflect that, to be able to talk to someone in Ethiopia, and they feel that the messaging talks to their identity, to someone in the DRC. So that's actually automatically cuts us beyond the others that are in the game. Lastly, 360 strategy of being in social media, being in universities to talk to the young people. So that's our strategy.
Right. And the sacrifices that you've had to make, outside of obviously the financial out-of-pocket costs that come with setting up a media network such as this one, how have you been able to overcome that? And the staff that you have working around here that really are putting all their strength into making sure that the engine and the oil is well oiled and it's running very well. But how would you advise people that would want to make sure they keep it going?
Yeah, I have said what is important is to be driven by your vision, but the vision needs to be oiled. You sacrifice what you have to put the concept together. Give the concept life. Make sure that the quality is put together to a level there it could be acceptable to whoever is going to receive the product. What is really left is now catalytical partnerships. So we will be going out there and we are ready to partner with whoever is doing anything little in the media space. So we have laid the foundation. That will be a home for many who are trying it out there. That is also now our new vision going into the future. That is going to become also our strategic winning point. Because for them to try to be big wherever they are, it will be too costly. But when they come and connect to us, we will be able now to touch far and wide spaces, and all of it connecting. Hence we say, this is a galaxy. A galaxy is not only one star. StarSat has set up the universe. And we come as a galaxy to make them even shine much more.
And I'm glad you're explaining the name. That was going to be my next question to you. What inspired you to come up with this galactical name, Galaxy Universal Network? It speaks really of huge things. And how would you tie that into the dream of the network, the name that you chose?
One, because we are hoping, and it's part of our plan, to even produce other channels beyond this one. We intend to produce stars even from places where you never imagined, in spaces where generally you wouldn't. A village young girl and a young boy, wherever they are, we will produce a star out of them, even in far-flung areas. But more importantly, is to take Africa to the world. The world has been writing and speaking on the behalf of Africa. This time, we want to take Africa to the world. We want to take the messages, the knowledge, the culture, the heritage of Africa and its own people. It must be spoken by the Africans themselves.
So you're saying that our viewers can expect content from outside of South Africa as well, that they can resonate with, that they can relate to, that brings them together as people of the same continent going forward?
Most certainly. When I talk about partnerships, I'm talking about entities of a similar nature. Wherever they are, we will partner so that we bring that content. We bring the heritage, we bring the knowledge, but be able now to leverage it to the world.
Right. And do you think that with platforms such as StarSat that is hosting this channel, and the kind of content that we see on there, how would you leverage a network such as this and how it would perform?
Well, definitely you could see that the StarSat strategy is based on diversification. There's a diverse array of content. We would come and augment on it by making sure we bring local content. But that content is not just local. It will be so local that it would even talk to the life of a villager, a life of a man who's living in an informal settlement, or a woman in an informal settlement. Will bring news of a municipality that is very small, that never made the news. So our content will be completely different, and we are hoping to maintain the rhythm, because we know we've got young people.
Yes.
We know that they can sustain the rhythm as we wish it to be.
Yes, because you may have an age a difference from very young people who may want to watch the channel to your pensioners. How do you bring that together to make sure that everyone is taken care of?
If you observe language in the news, we have already started to pitch some of our news in Zulu. We would proceed into other languages that we will reach all people who might not be conversant in English. We might want even to do it Swahili and different other languages.
And Shona?
And Shona, or you can say that. But at the same time, in social media, through feedback systems, we would be able to touch the youth. Even programming, we would bring programs that are light, that can resonate to the rhythm of the young people.
Right.
We want all and sundry to feel at home with Galaxy Universal Network.
And at home, I'm sure they will feel so. Thank you so much for your time and explaining to us. And once again, a huge congratulations to yourself and, of course, the whole team for being able to lift this channel up and having it launch and giving out such relevant content to South Africa, and not just South Africa but across the continent. So huge congratulations and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and the pleasure is mine.
And to you, our viewers at home, thank you so much for watching, but do stay with us. We are going for a very short break, and thereafter we'll be bringing you up to speed with the latest news.
Challenge your ordinary. Experience the extraordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Now, I believe that my peace is my most valuable asset.
Absolutely beautiful! This is exactly what I was looking for! DJ Khaled!
It is a day to celebrate.
We're ready for action. I like it when it's nice and soft. That is nice.
How was it like growing up in Nigeria? Yes, sir, you know what it is.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
You should just be what you want to be.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
For unbiased, uncensored news updates, rely on Galaxy News. We are fearless, zero favor and zero fiction.
We are the bridge that connects you from the rural to the urban.
From Times Square to Mary Fitzgerald Square, we're sure to give you the hottest stories from all four corners of the globe.
Bringing the latest news on business trends at the speed of light and transporting you to a world unseen.
Now so we come fly, go enter Lagos. The Zanga, inside Zanga for Lagos.
From the boardroom to the fan park and to the field.
Op ons kanaal nuus wat jou sal skok en verras.
Sources at the ranks, banks and all places buzzing with action. Sports, business, politics, your entertainment, fashion trends. We're talking of breaking news, exclusive and certainly the hottest stories in town.
For Galaxy News, I am Vuyo Mgwelo.
Now maybe this your boy, Osilama Otono.
Itabakheng Khatlo from Galaxy News.
I am Tatlo Mukhampanyane from Galaxy News.
I am Tusanda Nomosaka Kwabe Kuto for Galaxy UN.
Asbayiskele mthina.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to extend the nationwide lockdown by a further 2 weeks beyond the initial 21 days. This means that most of the existing lockdown
Jambo Masquerase Madikwani Sanwonani. A warm welcome to the show. This is Thought Farming. Thank you so much for joining us. This is your favorite network, Galaxy Universal, and this is a program called Thought Farming, where we will be talking about issues to do with food for thought. Joining me in studio is a man that I have always wanted to speak to for a very long time. I've stalked his media space for the longest time and he's not aware of that, and I'm making him blush in studio today, so I think I've made my point. Bishop Maponga, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the show, and we are excited to become part of this wonderful news network and social space for sharing information.
We are just as excited, you know, for having entered the media space, and we've done so with such a bang and with guests such as yourself. We're here to stay, and we're here to show what we are made of, and, you know, with shows such as the one that we have here today. And who better to speak to than yourself? You know, you're very vocal in your thoughts, your opinions. Some of them are viewed to be controversial depending on which side of the fence that you are. But just looking at where we are as, you know, as Pan-Africanists, because part of what this channel is looking to do is to bring together Africans, you know, as one. And some say perhaps one of the problems is because we don't know each other as Africans. How do you think we can bridge that gap?
I think on the one side, the nature of our problem is the problem of our nature. So to start, you know, Africans go to school to read and write, to learn to read and write. Unfortunately, at graduation, there are two things that we don't do. We don't read, we don't write. One arrogant European was actually saying, if you want to hide it away from the black person, write it down. We would rather sign on the dotted line without reading the contract itself. And I think one of the challenges that we have as educated Africans in the 21st century is how do we download our oral tradition into formal education so that we can bridge the gap of information between the older people and the younger generation.
Right.
Our education system right now constantly separates the old people and the young people to such an extent that by the time you are educated, the first thing you show to show that you are now educated is by looking at your mother and say, you don't understand me. And you don't understand, mommy. You won't understand.
And we hear a lot of that from our youth. You know, mommy, you just don't understand me. But just looking at one aspect of your life that I think is shall I say more prominent, is the Christianity side and how we gel that with Chivano. With some people would say the two don't mix. You know, you cannot be black and African and said to believe in a white Jesus. And yet we've got our ancestors, Vadzimu. Is it possible to be able to communicate to both and believe in both as a human being and still be centered in one spirituality?
The European system of education does not produce holistic people. It produces schizophrenic people who have multiple personalities, who are one thing on a Sunday, they are another thing on a Monday. Because by the virtue of being a Christian, it looks like you must detox of being an African. Christianity actually is an intentional colonial system which wins and pushes people away from their own culture into a European culture. The question I would ask you back is, are we teaching people Christianity or we're teaching people European culture?
All right.
Because most of the practices that we do in the Christian space are actually European culture. White weddings, for example, white music, for example, white fashion, for example, and white diet, white medicine, white employment, white suburbs, and etc. So basically, when you are going to school, you are learning as fast as possible to escape from poverty and the whole issue of a degraded African society into this Eurocentric society. But the day trouble hits you, you are going to fall back to default. And it is my greatest passion at this old age. I joined ministry when I was 16. I'm going for 55s now, 50 plus. I'm no longer a young boy. At a young age, we accepted everything. At a mature age, we question everything. The whole idea is now, how do you help and assist the African to unify himself? Jesus had his genealogy in the book of Matthew. Why is your genealogy not important?
What defaults do you speak of, Bishop, when you say every time we get into trouble as a people, you know, you go back to your default settings? How would you define those?
Your default is your earthing.
Okay.
Where all of a sudden you discover that what has happened to you physically has a spiritual inclination, has a social impact, and also has a mental impact. And that's a moment when, boom, your house has caught fire, your child has been knocked by a car, your mom is sick, and etc. And all of a sudden you discover it is not just physical. There must be another play in the spiritual space. How you begin to find solutions around those issues remains your own space of thought. But the very fact that now you no longer look at physical acts as merely being physical, but you begin to understand that there could be maybe much more in terms of my social interaction. Did I meet someone socially who has impacted this on me? Is there something in my background that is happening? Is there something that is about to happen in the future? What is happening to the personal part of me? And then when you are in that space, I want to call that the default. Had you been thinking like that on a day-to-day basis, then you'd find that your life actually becomes balanced. Because life is not just about making money in your pocket. Money is a spirit. Life is not about having a husband in your bed. The spiritual inclinations. Life is not just about having children amongst you. the social dynamics, the financial implications. So immediately when you begin to think in a holistic fashion, your decisions are not just financial. A person who is stealing is only looking at the monetary side.
Right.
But after you're caught, what is the impact on the greater social network all around, which you never thought about? You're raping someone could be a moment of chance. But when you look at the impact to the person, to the community, and all around you, and we don't think like that as Africans. Immediately when we become educated, we become qualified fools because our minds are so academically and career-driven. Education gives you a chair. Morality gives you the existence there and longevity. And we don't think in a holistic fashion. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I'm glad that it's coming from you, Bishop, because you are, for those that know you, like myself, you're a very learned man. And yet you're very centered in your Africanism and in your blackness, if we can call it that.
It's called melanin.
Melanin, and you have you have a lot of that, as you were alluding to before the show started, wanting the lights to be on, which is always a good thing. But trying to merge that and be centered to be able to, I know of a lot of young people who have gone to Model C schools, but they also have a calling. They say they have a calling. You know, it comes in their dreams that they have to ukutwala, things like that. While they remain very modern in their lifestyle, but they also are very respectful and recognize that spiritual side of their self. Isn't that a push and pull effect? Can that really be reconciled?
It's not a mystery. It's not a mystery, madam.
Okay.
You have that thing that follows you every day. We call it a shadow. When I was young, I tried to run away from it for quite some time until my grandmother sat down with me and said, man, get used to this guy. He's not going to go anywhere for a very long time. And every time when you go to bed, you and your shadow are in the same height. And then you move into the land of the dreams, the land of visions, the land of the spirit. It's not even some people. We all are spiritual. We all dream. We all have premonitions. We all have deja vus. We all have the gut feeling. The business is right. The contract is right. You look at the contract, you look at this person, and something in your spirit simply says, something isn't right here. What do you call that? What do you call that? So it's not just a few people. To some certain people, it might be accelerated and might have slightly more of that. But we are all spiritual. And the fact that Christianity, in its nobleness, has not been able to interpret, understand, and assist those who have these gifts, as it were. Some dream herbs. You're sleeping at night and you dream a herb. You identify the herb, few hours later the person who is sick is walking to the yard. And you're giving them. So even the concept of medicine in the African space, people actually have these dreams and have a gift of premonition to be able to be shown something before it happens. By the time it happens, they activate that. Now,
and there's nothing evil about that.
Christianity immediately looks at that and says, what is evil about it? Peter was sleeping in his bed, and while he was sleeping, he dreamt of a big basket full of animals. And the Lord says, slaughter and eat. No, I cannot eat it. That is dead. Don't go and kill what I've created dirty. Immediately when he woke up, the people from Macedonia come and say, please come and preach to us. So what he received was a premonition for what was going to be happening a few moments later. And you read throughout the whole Bible. The Bible is infested with dreams and visions from Joseph to Nebuchadnezzar to Daniel to Isaiah to Ezekiel. Even the three wise men who came to see Christ at his birth in their dreams. An angel visited them and told them, don't go back home the same way. So how do we now come to accept the biblical text, which is saturated with such content of visions and dreams? But the people who believe in this Christianity must de-associate themselves totally from the very context, content, and the machinery that puts down the biblical text together. Hence, I'm saying it's schizophrenic. It's nice to read about it. When it comes to applying it, it does not apply to you.
But does it become different, Bishop, if the person that you're dreaming about is somebody that has passed away, that is telling you to do certain things or giving you some kind of advice?
You want me to shock you?
Please do.
Now, I was brought up by my grandfather.
Yes.
From zero to the time when I was 5, 6, 10 years old. And I came back to meet him up when I was 13, 15, 16. Basically, I grew up under his feet. Now, when my grandfather passes away, sometimes I dream and my grandfather is sitting next to my bed and he's talking to me. What do I say? A demon is talking to me. Now, if my grandfather is a demon because he has passed away, and if an African ancestor is a demon after passing away, the question is, so what are you before you die? If your forefathers are demons, then why is it we call on Abraham, we call on Isaac, and we call on Jacob? Are they still alive? With the same pen that you underline by calling on the gods of the forefathers of the Jews that have gone past. Why are you afraid of calling on the God of Michena, the God of Nokwara, the God of Maponga, the God of Mnyuki, who is the son of Cush, who is the son of Noah, who is the son of Methuselah, who is the son of Enoch, who is the son of Seth, who is the son of Adam, who is the son of God?
Right. Perhaps one would say, but the same Bible says, there's no relationship between the living and the dead.
You are a fruit. Your parents are the tree. Your forefathers are the roots. Mudzimu, mumudzi, umu. Inside the roots. Identifying your roots is not demonic. That's why Matthew chapter 1 dedicates the whole chapter in giving us a genealogy of a man called Jesus, son of Joseph, son of Solomon, son of David, son of Jesse, son of Perez, son of Abraham. So why are you wasting time telling us who is he coming from? Because you want to establish that your genealogy is actually sacred history. But anyway, on farmers of thought, before we become religious, on farmers of thought, we are going to be taking our time in terms of looking at the three estates of the human being.
Right.
And if I can consider this to be your thinking tool, we're going to take people through this thinking tool.
Okay.
The first estate is the estate of the mind, who is planting seeds in your mind. The next estate is the one that hangs between your legs. Who is planting between your legs, and what posterity and children are you producing? The last estate is the one that is underneath your feet. What are you putting on the ground? We all as Africans have these three estates. The question we want to ask is that, how can you give a person an estate of land when they are not in control of the estate of their own minds? Is an African able to manage the quality of the seed that is in their minds, or we've become coconuts who are brown on the inside but white on the inside? Are we able to run on the default of who we are? The first rule in the Constitution is to allow every human being to be. Can the African be without necessarily feeling victimized by European and Caucasian standards of beauty, standards of thought and education? Secondly, do we have control of our posterity and reproduction? Or now the government and everybody else is managing our children, and how many children you must have, and contraception and everything else? What are the benefits? What are the side effects of that? And finally, land is equivalent to our women. I can sleep with my wife once a week or once a month or once a year. It's none of your business. As equivalent is my land, so is my wife. And if I cannot make the land pregnant, it's illegal to make my wife pregnant. For the first wife is my land, and the second wife is the two-legged one. So I have 4 daughters. Before you come to my house to look for my daughter in marriage, I want to find out if you have made any piece of ground pregnant.
I second that. But just to speak of... the issue of land is a very emotive topic here in Africa. We saw what happened next door in Zimbabwe with the land reform.
Which is a good thing, by the way. Which is a good thing. Okay. I'm here to protect that.
Okay.
It's a good thing.
All right.
If your husband is not sleeping with you, and I'm your neighbor, it's none of my business as to whether he is able to do so. Our land is equivalent to our women.
Okay. So the question of people that say, you want the land here in South Africa, what do you want to do with it? Do you have any plans for it? Is that a good question to ask?
The question is so beautiful, but it's a question being asked by fools.
Yes.
Because a fool,
I'm not saying yes.
Yes, but a fool does not know that land is surety in the bank. Land is a guarantee for the loan. There is only one real estate, and that is land. The rest are liquid estates. So if you don't understand what land is, you don't understand what banking is, you don't understand what insurance is. What makes a white boy walk up to the bank and get a 10 million rand loan is not his complexion, but he's got surety on a piece of land that is viable, which he can use as guarantee to access loans. Now, when Africans go to the bank, they're looking for money for houses and for cars, which is poverty. The real money which we must access is for business and development, and the only guarantee that the bank will accept, it is the estate of land. And when land is in black hands, we can access business money.
Bishop, you spoke of the Constitution and a lot of our governance and how we govern our countries and our states. We've borrowed from overseas, from the United Kingdom. Do you think that is working in Africa, or do we need to find our own way of governance, of how we
are going to have a full show on the issues of governance, like break.
Because does it not then tie down to the issue of land and how we get to own our own land?
The country we are living in is being managed by foreigners who have put a surrogate government and given them an instrument of management so that the colonialist does not need to be in power. But as long as his constitution is in power, whoever is managing that country is obliged to follow the rules that has been set up by the foreigner. So here we are as Africans being run by the Roman Dutch law. The question is, why don't we have Roman and Dutch passports if we are being run by the Roman and Dutch? But now you understand that the colonialism is able to put a false system, a surrogate system. Then you can put puppet governments that manage the business for you while you are in absence. So right now what you have, politics and churches are an entertainment for the poor.
And we have a lot of churches that want to open right now.
More than hospitals and schools.
Under COVID. You spoke about wanting to defend what happened in Zimbabwe with the land reform, another very controversial topic, how it was implemented. The late President Robert Mugabe, before he died, perhaps alluded to the fact that they could have done things differently. Would you agree to that?
I personally...
Or are you just saying, look, what people do with land is up to them and how it's done, it's...
I'll share with you a totally different picture that will shock you. When you talk about land in Zimbabwe, we're not talking about 1 hectare. We're not talking about 2 hectares. When you're driving out of Masvingo towards Chiredzi, just after you pass, Ngundu, you find that from Ngundu right up into halfway towards, towards Mkwasini, almost like 150 kilometers. One big farm sitting there belonging to Mr. Maware. 150 square kilometers with one house that is Maware's house. And including the people that are living there are living on his land. Because the colonialists after World War II, the British soldiers were given a horse, jump on your horse, run in that direction. When you get tired, put a stone. Wake up the following morning, run in that other direction, put a stone. Now everything that is there, including the people that are there, they are yours. I lived in London for 5 years. You can buy your house. When you are tired of Britain, take your house and go back. The land remains belonging to the Queen. But when these colonialists come to Africa, they want to own the house, they want to own the air, they want to own what's under the ground, they want to own the neighbors and stuff like that. We're saying that is illegal. What Mugabe did, in the short term, it affected our economy. But in the long term, if we are able to maximize on the usage of that land, mining is in the land, water is in the land, agriculture is in the land, housing is in the land, and without land, we don't have a conversation at all. There's only one ministry we need in government, and that's the Minister of Land. And we went to war, not to share toilets with whites. We can build our own toilets. We went to war because we want access to our land so that our placentas that were buried in the ground can be connected with the land from which we have come from.
The discussion continues here in South Africa, the issue of land. You know, it's made vociferous here and there sometimes. You know, it's a bit quiet. Of course, now with what's happening, people are not really talking about it. Some say there's a lot of land that people can claim, but why do they want land that other people already have?
Let's cut it short.
Yes.
We don't want land. We want productive land. Please underline
that's where I'm
You cannot tell me that blacks are being put in quarantine and in Kuruman where there's no water, where there's no good weather and everything else, and say there's lots of land there. We want fertile land which can be used for agriculture, and we want that land in black hands so that we can control what we're eating. Right now, South Africa is eating genetically modified foods because a group of Europeans are managing those lands and feeding Africans on plastic foods. We don't have control over what we eat right now. Everything that is lying in the supermarkets is being managed by a group of cronies who decide what they want to do, by the way. And remember, if you are smart enough, that you can use agriculture as a weapon of mass destruction, both for sterilization and other criminal activities that can happen on the food cycle. And until an African can feed themselves, they are truly not free.
Let's take that thought across the continent, Bishop. Which other countries have been able to own their own land, you know, to make it belong to the natives of the land?
You will not own land and not offend the international community.
So it hasn't happened across the continent.
It
Nobody
has
has been
happened in
successful.
spasms. It has happened in spasms.
Okay.
But whatever it has happened, Mozambique, for example, they filled up their canals with concrete and cement because they were angry, they were going back away. In Congo, they are spoiling and putting cyanide in Congo water. People are dying down the river. In Kenya, the Mau Mau War had been fought. In Tanzania, the Chama cha Mapinduzi. In Zimbabwe, it was Chimrenga. In South Africa, Umkhonto we Sizwe. Why is it that the African must fight for his land? We have never gone to Europe to fight for European land. For crying out loud. I don't remember a group of Africans toy-toying in Benin, in Luxembourg, or in Frankfurt, fighting over European land. Why must the African fight for his own land and there must be a rule of law? Constitution says. How come the Constitution only applies to the African? Why can't the Constitution apply to America? What was taken without land must be taken back without land. The slaves that were taken without passports, they must be returned without passports. You cannot tell me the rule of law when it is convenient for you.
And we have leaders that seem to be very cordial and, that decided to make peace with the colonialists. And they say, some semblance of a relationship should still be kept. Do you think that's what has cost us?
Our own leaders have become pimps at a prostitution house of selling the African sanctity for their own entertainment. We know African leaders have accounts in Mauritius, they have accounts in Cayman Islands, they have accounts in all the tax havens around the world, busy robbing and stealing people, and they make agreements with the foreigners, they make agreements with the East and the West, not for the benefit of the Africans, but to manage the kitty for the multinational companies. And I say shame on African presidents who can be sitting around African countries and they consider the budgets of our own countries as if they are their own personal budgets. Relatives and cousins and nepotisms and corruption is running everywhere. Because when you elect an African president, he cannot deal with power and sharing responsibilities and sharing profits with these fellow communities. All you know is how to make 65 cars, 25 in front, 22 at the back with motorcades and everything else. How do you want to be protected from the people who elected you into power?
Bishop, promise me you'll come back for more on this.
I am going to be here until the cows come home.
There you have it, our viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bishop Mabonga, of course, giving us his insights and thoughts about Africa, the issue of land and other interesting aspects that intellectual aspects that he had around that. We'll be having more discussions around this, and be sure to join us. The conversation continues online. Go to our Facebook page right now. It is Galaxy Universal Network, and also our Twitter handle at GNU_TV_ and tell us what your thoughts are with regards to the conversations that we're having in the studio today, and we'll be happy to engage with you. My name is Audrey Chimanda. We're going for a break. Do stay tuned for more news.
Challenge your ordinary. Experience the extraordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Now, I believe that my peace is my most valuable asset.
Absolutely beautiful! This is exactly what I was looking for! DJ Khaled!
It is a day to celebrate.
We're ready for action. I like it when it's nice and soft. Yeah, that is nice.
How was it like growing up in Nigeria? Yes, sir, you know what it is.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
You should just be what you want to be.
Experience the extraordinary with Starsat.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with Starsat.
For unbiased, uncensored news updates, rely on Galaxy News. We are fearless, zero favor and zero fiction.
We are the bridge that connects you from the rural to the urban.
From Times Square to Mary Fitzgerald Square, we're sure to give you the hottest stories from all four corners of the globe.
Bringing the latest news on business trends at the speed of light and transporting you to a world unseen.
Now so we come fly, go enter Lagos. The Zanga, inside Zanga for Lagos.
From the boardroom to the fan park and to the field.
Op ons kanaal nuus wat jou sal skok en verras.
Sources at the ranks, banks, and all places buzzing with action.
Sports, business, politics, your entertainment, fashion trends. We're talking of breaking news, exclusive, and certainly the hottest stories in town.
For Galaxy News, I am Vuyo Mgwelo.
Now maybe this your boy Osilama Otono.
Itabakheng Khatlo from Galaxy News.
I am Katlo Mkhambanyane from Galaxy News.
I am Tusanda Nomosaka Kwabe Kuto for Galaxy UN.
Asibhayisikele mthina.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to extend the nationwide lockdown by a further 2 weeks beyond the initial 21 days. This means that most of the existing lockdown measures will remain in force.
It's a combination of law enforcement agency. Our call is very clear. People must stay home. They must not be traveling unnecessarily.
This might last longer.
As you have heard it, we are still right here.
Reporting for Galaxy TV News.
Galaxy News.
Stay tuned with us.
Level 3 regulations are an indication that our country has done the preparatory work to start moving towards opening up more sectors of the economy. This is because the last 2 months of lockdown gave us a room to build up an extensive public health response and prepare our health system for a possible increased infection rate. We must remember that government needs all of us to play our part in the fight against the pandemic. We must act responsibly and take necessary measures, such as advised, and that it is important for us to wash our hands or sanitize every time and hands regularly, wear a mask or face cloth, ensure we keep necessary distance, whether we are in a public space or in our work environment. For accommodation in terms of other issues, in terms of permitted and businesses, that's where the conditions have changed. So with effect of the first, no need to request a letter. You have to keep the records. You have to read what we are saying in terms of the guidelines that we'll be issuing and the protocols that we have agreed between ourselves and you as a sector. So we're expecting you to keep to those protocols that we have agreed to. Hunting activities are allowed during level 3. The following economic activities remain prohibited. Conferencing, events, and entertainment activities, such as festival, remains prohibited. We do